At what point does love stop being beautiful and become something painful? She was the closest thing to a goddess that existed on earth. Everything about her was joy, peace, and happiness. Wherever she went, she found beauty. To her, the city lights were as beautiful as the sunrises. The bag fluttering in the wind had the same grandeur as the leaves fluttering in the breeze. Everything she touched became better. Everyone she met felt honored, even if they were with her for just a moment. She was so sweet, they said, so kind, so beautiful and sincere, warm like her golden brown eyes in the sunset light. His eyes were blue, icy, cold, intense, a blue so dark it's almost a new color. They were focused eyes, hard eyes that penetrated her tenderness. They took it all in, those eyes, noticing details that tried to slip away and hide like bugs, only to be discovered by a hand moving a stone like it was nothing. Most of all, they absorbed it. They absorbed every part of her, every gentle curve of her perfect body, every sparkling smile and every breath, every inch of skin. At least that's how I imagined them together. Cecily. I downed my wine, startled by the sudden touch of Mina's hand on my forearm. The glass broke and red wine scattered across the table. "Dress!" Natasha screamed. There was no need for such noise. The liquid would not even dream of staining Mina's wedding dress. Not a drop came within a foot of her, preferring to soak into the immaculate tablecloth and drip onto the skirt of my own lavender bridesmaid dress. However, Natasha screamed, Mina sighed, and the wedding guests collectively moved, heads turning towards me as if at the command of a hive. Natasha jumped between Mina and me, a bodyguard from the bloody red wine stain, threatening the immaculate dress that hugged Mina's flawless body. Silence hung in the hall. I didn't dare look at Axel, but I felt those intense eyes watching me from the other side of the main table. "Sorry." My voice trembled, not from nerves, but because it always trembled. Of course I was forgiven. No one wants to be the one who almost ruins the bride's wedding dress. There was a moment when I thought she could do something. The moment I didn't give her enough credit. Her eyes flashed, her jaw clenched. I imagined how she would scream at me, tell everyone who I was and what I had done. I was mistaken. Always graceful, Mina laughed loudly. "It's nothing," she said in a melodious voice. "Even if it was something, it's just a dress." Muttered whispers returned to the room as people looked away. Natasha moved away at the slightest touch of Mina's hand, and then she placed a comforting hand on my shoulder. "I just wanted to ask if you're okay," she continued. "You looked so lost, like when you write." I doubted I had that look, but Mina gave me a chance to leave. "Just dreaming. I thought I could, you know. Inspiration." Mina's face lit up. "Poem? Maybe." "Oh, Cecily, that would be... Oh, I hope you'll write. Please, if you write about me and Axel, you'll share it with us, right?" I nodded, although that was about as likely as sharing the details of the nap she had interrupted. However, that strange, creeping feeling came over me again, and I knew that Axel was looking in my direction again. I risked a glance in his direction as the waiter ran over to wipe away the wine. And in fact, Axel's gaze was directed directly at me. His lips twitched slightly in a half-smile when I met his gaze. He knows. I forced a smile through trembling lips and looked away, rubbing at the red stain on my skirt with a damp napkin. He doesn't know, I told myself. This is impossible. He can hear your thoughts. "Impossible," I said out loud. "Miss?" asked the waiter. I coughed, trying to make it sound like I was laughing. "Sorry, I need more sorry." I felt Axel's gaze on me as I walked to the toilet, but when I looked back, he was leaning Mina in for a kiss, with a smile on his face, focused only on her. I didn't want to be with him when I met him. We took the same courses, screenwriting and studies in literature and film. I was a year older than him, and we had different majors, so crossing paths was unlikely to begin with, but I missed the memo from the universe that this was a sign. It's not that I didn't notice him. Noticed, everyone noticed. Half the women in our courses melted because he was dark and silent, a mysterious enigma, a beautiful martyr artist whose secrets were buried beneath the carved lines of his statuette face. The other half melted because he was an athlete. His body was as toned as his face was perfect. He seemed to be interested in none of them. Some tried to seduce him with low-cut blouses and flirtatious swings of their hair. Others tried to engage his mind by talking about auteur films and the greatness of pioneers such as Dreyer. They were the embodiment of a woman who came and went, speaking of Michelangelo as if he were a patient under the ether, like yellow smoke drifting down the street. They all wanted to know his secrets. They all wanted to be the woman who would win his attention, who would pave the way to his heart and make him reveal the secrets of his soul to them. Except me. He seemed boring to me. Oh, another artistic romantic in a black sweater who carries a canvas bag over his shoulder and has a stupid, pretentious name. Axel Pierce, as if his parents knew he would be a grim old soul. Another college student with longish hair and pouty lips, a permanent scowl on his face as he reflected on the unfairness of life, the illusion of freedom, and the lack of inspiration in the world. Another tormented creature standing amid the noise of the stormy sea, wondering if all we see or seem to be is just a dream within a dream. He tired me out. Frightening and unattainable, he sat alone in class, either not noticing or ignoring the girls who cast touching glances in his direction. I thought I was above this, more than this, too good to be a cliché like everyone else. So what if I'm a student poet? So what if I dressed in black? Black scarves, black shirts, black jeans, and black hair. I didn't need to be completely cliché and obsessed with this creature sitting broodingly in the corner. As it turned out, Axel was just quiet and not very good at making friends. I learned this when he and I were asked to be peer review partners in a screenwriting class. At first, I considered it a failure. Rolling my eyes, I sank into the chair next to him, glaring at the professor as he waited for everyone to pair up. "I'm Cecily." "Axel," came the resonant answer. I tapped my fingers on the table twice. "I'm pretty critical when it comes to reviewing, so don't expect me to be lenient with you." And they shouldn't. That would defeat the whole point. I turned my head and found myself trapped in his gaze, like a spider under glass, mesmerized by the strange color of his eyes and the depth of his gaze. Then the professor spoke. I turned away and forgot about this moment. I found him to be almost surprisingly articulate, thoughtfully receptive, and irritatingly silent. When we first exchanged review assignments, I was struck by the story of cold revenge. His main character was horribly abused, mistreated by everyone who was supposed to love him, but she did nothing. I felt angry at her, irritated by her inaction, until she methodically destroyed the people around her. Every word was golden. This scoundrel wrote better than I could ever dream of. "You're going to be a great screenwriter," I told him when I gave him his job back. "I want to be a video editor," came the muffled reply. It was almost sad that he didn't want to use such a talent. Gradually, Axel and I became acquaintances. Not friends, really, not much more than people who nodded hello as they passed each other on campus. As the semester progressed, however, we became those acquaintances who met up to study or discuss ideas in the library, and then those acquaintances who went to the campus bar for drinks after a midterm exam. "You should meet my roommate," I told him. "Why?" "I think you'll like her." He didn't shrug, nod, say yes, no, or maybe. His eyebrow twitched, which was the most reaction I could have hoped for. I didn't think my roommate would really like him, but she had just broken up with her boyfriend, and I was desperately trying to find her a one-night stand so she would stop moping around the apartment. It was more for her benefit than mine. I hated to see her sad. When Mina entered the bar, his gaze immediately went to her. He watched as she walked quietly through the crowd, people partying like reeds to let her pass, an aura of calm spreading behind her until she reached us. "This is my roommate, Mina. Mina, this is my classmate, Axel." None of them heard me. I've never seen Axel smile, actually. That day, I watched his face break into a smile, like a flower opening for the first time in the sun, feeling the first magnificent rays on its silken petals, and finally understanding its purpose. Two people fell in love that day, and I was one of them. I denied that I fell in love. He spent hours that seemed like days and days that seemed like eternities in our apartment. Hours, days, months. Their love did not develop over time. The seed was not planted and tended until it took root, sprouted, and blossomed. No, their love was dandelions. One moment they were gone, and the next they took over everything. And lucky for me that I was the one who blew the feather. Day after day, Axel was with us in the morning when I woke up, and after each lesson when I returned. He was a better roommate than Mina, even though he didn't actually live with us, and I would never say anything bad about Mina. The constant presence of her yoga mat stretched out in the middle of the living room where the coffee table would have been, and her thick hair clogging our shower was a small price to pay for her friendship. At first, I took it logically. He was attractive, I told myself. It was a physical attraction, nothing more. Childhood love, daydreaming. You can recognize Michelangelo's statue of David as attractive and know that it doesn't mean you're in love. After the first few weeks of their relationship, Mina sat down with me one evening before Axel had started spending the night, when it was still just Mina and I, when I was taking a break from seeing his face every time I turned around. You don't mind if I date Axel, right? I suddenly looked up at her. Why should I object? She bit her lip, eyes wide and vulnerable, and remained silent. She knows. He's yours, don't worry. But I'm in love with him. I'm not in love with him, don't worry. Mina looked at me sadly, silently. She hears you. I laughed at this, causing Mina to have a strange expression on her face. She couldn't hear me, I told myself. It was overly paranoid, even for me. The silence dragged on, becoming even more awkward. What if she hears you? You and Axel are a wonderful couple, I said. You are perfect for each other. Her face brightened, waves of radiant delight overwhelmed her and filled our small kitchen. I really like him, she said. I really, really like it. I swallowed a lump of irritation and another lump of guilt. Mina was perfect. She didn't deserve my evil thoughts. I had my chance with Axel. I didn't use it. I didn't need him. That weekend was the first time he spent the night with us. They tried to be quiet. It made everything even worse knowing how hard they tried to muffle their sounds for my sake. The walls absorbed the sound of Mina's high-pitched screams, Axel's low breathing, the rhythmic pounding of her bed against our shared wall, and squeezed every noise into my ears as I lay on my bed. I tried to convince myself that the tingling that started in my heart and seeped through my bones was embarrassment, or maybe irritation that they hadn't asked me to leave for the night so I wouldn't have to hear it. When I came out of my bedroom the next morning and found Axel sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee, I tried to smile. He looked up at me, eyes patiently focused, and asked how I slept. Okay, I said. No. He nodded once, wildly, stoically. Fine. Mina cheerfully ran into the kitchen from the corridor. Good morning, she exclaimed, her voice bright and soft. Precisely, would you like some pancakes? I was thinking of making pancakes this morning. I love pancakes, and I was adamant that I didn't feel anything for Axel, so I said yes and ate breakfast with them. I didn't admit to myself that I was in love with him until one night I heard him say it, his voice as quiet as a pebble falling into a lake, rolling over the walls. I love you, Mina. My heart sank and squeezed and cracked, and I could see them. I could see him. I could see his lips moving as he spoke. I could see dark blue eyes fixed on her face and her face only. I didn't love him until she beat him. I didn't love him until he looked at her as if she were the only woman in the world. I loved him, and he loved her, and I cried. We were with friends. Other friends. Their faces became blurry in my memory, smooth and plastic and unimportant. In my memories, I only remembered Mina and Axel and Natasha, probably because I wasn't paying attention. I dreamed, always dreamed, and the dream that took over my every moment of day and night was Axel. I remember this dream. I was imagining his body, specifically. That day, Axel wore a dark gray knitted sweater, very artist-like, not at all like his real personality. He often wore sweaters, usually with high collars, because he was always cold. That was the only complaint I remember from Mina, and it wasn't even a real complaint. His hands were just cold, and she took them between hers, trying to warm him up. Such a small action, so beautiful. His sweater didn't have a high collar that day. It was a round neckline, and I remember it because I looked at Adam's apple and wondered if he liked being kissed on the neck. This led to wondering if he liked being kissed in other places, and this led to imagining what his chest looked like under a knit sweater, whether he had that muscle line on his ribs that some guys have, and whether he has a pronounced V-shaped line on his stomach, pointing under the waistband of his black jeans, and Earth, Cecily. I blinked at Natasha. What? She burst out laughing. Must be deep thoughts. That's her look as a writer, Mina correctly noted. Have you been thinking about a story or a poem, Cecily? Must be a poem about Axel's body. You undressed him in your mind, Natasha teased. She knows. I didn't do it. I tried to sound haughtily offended and slightly dignified, but the redness spreading across my face gave me away. We all know what you were thinking, Natasha continued. Stop, Natasha, seriously, just stop, please stop. Stop it, Natasha, seriously, Mina said. Was it logical to connect Mina's words with my thoughts? No. Did it stop the intrusion of the idea that they could hear what I was hiding in my mind, that they knew what I was thinking, that they knew that the only thing I was thinking about was Axel? Also no. It was crazy. Crazy. It was wrong. I was wrong. I was sick. My mind was flickering feverishly, turning on and off, as heavy as a libertine's kiss, and he was telling me that they knew. It didn't help when I looked up, eyes of ice completely focused on me, penetrating my mind and my soul and into those dark corners where the rotting moss of obsession invaded my mind like dandelions. I noticed when he started imitating some of my mannerisms. Of course I noticed, because I noticed when I did it myself. It started when Mina was cooking dinner for the three of us one night. So, Cecily, she said easily, although butterflies pounded her words, making them shake with nerves. Axel and I wanted to discuss something with you. They know. I tapped my fingers on the table 6 times. I had to. I was drawn to this. Twice with your thumb, twice with your middle finger, twice with your index finger. What's happened? My voice trembled. Neither of them noticed anything unusual about it, chalking up the fragility to my usual shaky tone rather than the tornado of panic raging in my throat. Mina sat down at the table next to me and opposite Axel. She was going to tell me that she knew I was in love with Axel. She was going to say that she knew I was listening to them make love. She was going to call me creepy and obsessive and disgusting and tell me to leave and never talk to them again, and the worst part of it all was that I would never see Axel again, and oh God, wasn't that the problem all along? My chin trembled and I tapped my fingers again. Knock, 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 knock. Well, you know, Axel and I have been together for almost a year now. Has it really been almost a year? I tried not to look straight and just nodded. Knock, 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 knock. And we were thinking, maybe if you don't mind. Oh my God. Maybe Axel could move in with us. Her voice rose at the end, part questioning, part pleading. To us? Well, yeah, I don't. I mean, if you want to move, you can, but I really don't want you to leave. Axel looked at me. I knew he was watching. I felt his gaze as if his nails were scratching my bare arms. I didn't look at him. I couldn't look at him. Knock, 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 knock. We'll split the rent between the 3 of us, and the utilities too. Her tone was strange, as if she didn't think she'd have to convince me. This was not like the Mina I knew, although perhaps I was imagining it. I was, of course, absorbed in my own thoughts. Is waking up every morning knowing that Axel is in bed just a few feet from mine, albeit on the other side of the wall, worth saving a few $100s a month? Is it worth it, knowing that I will see his face morning and evening, that there is no escape except to close the bedroom door? He will be here all the time, will use the same bathroom as me, will be naked there seconds before me, will eat and breathe and sleep in the same space as me. He will always be there, will be there for me, my tormentor, my love, will be there while I watch him be with someone else. It will be excruciating agony, constant torture. A few $100s a month in savings, and all it will cost is my sanity. Of course, I had already given it away for free, so the decision was simple. Of course, I said. Yes, that's a great idea. Knock, 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 knock. Mina's face lit up, and I smiled back at her, fake and forced, unbalanced. I knew you'd say yes. Thank you, Cecily. She hugged me from her chair, warm and smooth, like comforting lobster water. Honey, when do you want to move? I accidentally glanced at Axel and became lost in the ice when he looked back. Next week, he said, and his fingers mirrored mine on the table. Knock, 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 knock. I started looking for a job, something that could supplement my modest income from writing. I applied to publishing houses and newspapers, then bookstores and libraries, and eventually got a job as a salesperson in a fine art store near campus. My lack of knowledge about brushes and canvases wasn't a problem. Most customers thought they knew more than the stupid people behind the counter, and that was true in my case. Mina worked part-time as a yoga instructor while she was studying and started doing it full-time after graduating. Her goal was to open her own studio, and she was on her way to it. People loved Mina. She had a loyal following and just needed the initial investment to branch out and start her own business. Within a few months, Axel landed his dream job. He was hired by a local hockey team as a junior video editor and quickly became his boss's top assistant. I got promoted from salesperson to key manager, so that was nice. 6 months after his graduation, I walked into our apartment after work one evening and saw Mina standing in the living room. The apartment was full of hot, explosive energy that seemed to emanate from where she stood. "Cecily!" she screamed as soon as I entered. Her eyes sparkled, were bright and crazy and completely captivating. "What?" I asked impatiently, giving in to her energy. She burst into tears, spun in place, and could not contain her excessive joy, expressed in an electric dance. "Look!" I did everything as expected. I hugged her and squealed with delight, grabbing her left hand and gasping at the bulky stone adorning her finger. I gasped in theatrical surprise and hugged her again when she asked me to be a bridesmaid, fully obliging and telling her how honored I was. When Axel came out of the bedroom a few minutes later, I teased him good-naturedly, congratulated him, and found myself in the awkward position of not knowing if I should hug him too. Before I realized my decision, Axel had his arms around me and his chest was pressed against mine, and I could smell his cologne and my cheek was touching the coolness of his neck and his breath was on my ear, and I was touching him. Oh God, I was touching him, and then he let him go. I stepped back and laughed. It sounded crazy to my ears, but Mina and Axel didn't notice. Instead, they insisted on having a celebratory drink with me. I drank that sickly sweet, sparkling wine and pretended to be tired. "Long day," I said. "A big order arrived today. It's time for me to sleep. Don't make any noise, you two lovebirds." Ha 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 ha. Knock knock, knock knock, knock knock. They didn't get any quieter, and I couldn't help but stop crying the whole time. When they finished and I wiped the tears from my face, I started looking for a new place to live. Absence makes the heart grow fonder and obsession grows stronger. I shouldn't have thought that leaving Axel would help me get through this. If anything, it only made the situation worse. I conveniently forgot that I had fallen in love with him even before he moved in with Mina and me, conveniently told myself that moving would be a good idea, that it would be the cure for my poor, unhealthy mind. My new home was a basement 2 blocks from work. It was small, dark, and old. Being in the basement, it should have been constantly cold, but instead it was stuffy. The air hung like a spider's web, thick wisps of hanging heat. Walking from the bedroom to the kitchen was like swimming. Even opening the windows didn't help. The air was still as much a part of my apartment as the walls and floors and lamps. However, When Mina and Axel helped me unload the boxes and furniture I had taken, I was full of hope. This continued until we finished bringing my things in and found ourselves surrounded by towers of cardboard, which crushed my hopes. Mina wiped the dust from her hands. "Don't cry," I said. "I'll just miss you." Her voice sounded unusually quiet. If you ever need, if you ever need a place to stay, we're always welcome." "I know." She hugged me tightly and my heart sank. Over the years, she was the closest thing I had to a sister, the closest friend. It was a testament to how much I loved her that even though she was with Axel, I never felt resentment toward her. I also didn't feel resentment towards him for loving her. After Mina released me, I smiled. I continued to smile as Axel took her place, smiling, trying not to smell the sweat and cologne and him. I smiled when my body tingled, when my heart ached, when we parted. "I'll miss you," he said. "Yes," I answered, barely audible. He looked at me with a strange look. When they left, I sank onto the fluffy sofa that we had dragged down the stairs and covered my face with my hands. I could feel him on me, could feel the ghost of his cologne and sweat clinging to my shirt. He said he would miss you. Mina suggested meeting at least once a week. I always said yes. At first, Axel was there every time. The more often he was there, the more I convinced myself that he knew exactly what was going on in my head at any given moment. The more I convinced myself of this, the more silent I became around him, until I found myself answering questions only in my mind. "How are you doing?" he asked once. "This is terrible, I'm unhappy, and I miss you." There was a long pause for a moment. "Ah, Cecily." "Sorry," I said. "I thought everything is fine." He looked at me, nodded a little, and looked at Mina to continue the conversation. I stopped seeing him so often after that. Sometimes he was there when we met, sometimes he wasn't. Then sometimes he was there, and often he wasn't, and when he was there, it wasn't my Axel, not the Axel I was obsessed with. He seemed withdrawn, more tense than usual, and there was still a small part of me sane enough to assume it was because he thought I was crazy. It was the night a few months before the wedding when everything changed. "Where is Axel today?" I asked when Mina entered the bar. "At work," she answered easily. "He says hi." The evening felt like old times, the times before Axel, the times when Mina and I would just chat and laugh as we talked. We drank a lot and ordered fried snacks, chatting about all sorts of things, and for a while I wasn't obsessed. I wasn't sick. I was just Cecily. Even when she started talking about marriage, I was fine. I was fine up until the moment she smiled sadly, took a sip of her drink, and tilted her head to the left, looking at me. "Are you okay, Cecily?" "Yes, why?" She leaned forward. "I mean, really okay? You seem different." "Another? What could have been different? I've been obsessed with her now fiancé for years. Nothing changed there except the fact that I hardly saw him anymore, and I was miserable because I hardly saw him, and hardly seeing him, I should have just left it all. But instead, my fucked up mind insisted to make me remember what he sounded like and what he smelled like when he carried boxes, and Cecily." I continued to look at her, and Mina looked worried, very worried. "Cecily, what?" "Sorry," I said. I'm fine. I mean, yeah, I seem different. I'm living alone for the first time, and I miss you." She laughed uncertainly. "Okay, well, it's better than me, I guess." "Better than her? What's wrong?" I asked. "I'm worried." "How?" "Axel. Like, because of the wedding." "Just in general," she whispered. We, we fight more often now." "Argue? Are Axel and Mina fighting?" "How?" I asked quietly. She shrugged, still not looking at me. "You know how sometimes people get really upset? Like really, really upset? And it's not. I mean, it's not their fault that they get upset." The sip I took turned to gravel in my mouth. Pebble after pebble, stones filled my stomach as I considered what she was asking. Axel couldn't. He couldn't. My Axel was gentle. He wasn't capable of. It was impossible. Mina, you. Please don't tell anyone, she begged. I'm so ashamed. I don't know who else to talk to, Cecily. I just can't. I didn't want to. Is he hurting you? She stopped, her eyes widening. No, she cried. No. Notes. He never would. How could you? Cecily, he wouldn't. He would never hit me. I know, I said hastily. You sounded like. She began to laugh in a ringing tone, shaking her head. No, I don't. I understand why you might think that. He's not like that. He loves me, Cecily. I nodded, but I wasn't sure if I believed her. 2 weeks before the wedding, Mina and Axel invited everyone in the wedding party to their place for dinner. I didn't know if word of my strange behavior had spread to everyone or if I was particularly withdrawn that night, but I ended up next to Axel on the couch as the party continued without us. Are you okay? I finally asked. Yes. I kept my head straight, but glanced at him briefly. He did not move and continued to look at Mina. You are sure? His larynx twitched slightly as he swallowed. I am fine. I turned my head towards him. You have a scratch on your neck. This caught his attention. He looked away from Mina and touched the thin line that ran from his ear to the collar of his sweater. As soon as he moved his hand, I saw Mina glance again in our direction, her shoulders tense. Here? He asked. Yes. It happened while I was getting my hair cut. My hand shook. I looked at him with disbelieving eyes. Oh. Axel met my gaze. He's lying. There was something lurking in the depths of his eyes that made me shiver. Something cold. Something not quite balanced. Something familiar. Are you okay? He asked. Yes. My fingers moved spontaneously on my thigh. Knock, 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 knock. Axel's fingers echoed the movement, almost unconsciously, and a chill of uncertainty ran down my spine. Something has changed, I said. What? Something's wrong. What's wrong? He didn't say anything, but there was something. That little something that was hiding under his eyes appeared for a split second, and it wasn't guilt or anger or danger. It was something familiar, something wounded, something threatening to get out of control. That's how they know it, right? Axel, if there's something. Forget. Notes. You're wrong. Yes, but it's not. Cecily. His voice was barely a whisper. I'm getting married next month. He knows. I'm happy for you. And I. He knows. Okay, well, I'm glad you're okay. He didn't say anything, so I stood up, said goodbye to Mina, and left. Apart from my memories, I didn't see him again until the wedding. After nearly spilling wine on Mina's wedding dress and causing the waiter to look at me like I was unstable, which I was, but that was beside the point, I cleaned my dress as best I could. Natasha burst into the bathroom while I was drying a cloth under the hand dryer. Mina and Axel are going to have a toast, she chattered. They're just waiting for you. Are you okay? Fine. No, I wasn't okay. In any case, I wasn't okay mentally, I wasn't okay ethically, I wasn't feeling good, I wasn't morally good, I wasn't good in any way. I am fine. The stain on the skirt of my dress was barely noticeable, just a dark stain sprayed on my thigh. It's almost invisible. Natasha sounded like she was friendly, but it was an act. I knew it was a sham. I could tell that she hated me. I could tell that she knew how wrong it was for me to be here, that she saw my thoughts and knew what scared me so much. I didn't look at them. I looked, but didn't look. I returned to my chair, took a sip from my newly refilled glass of wine, and waited. A few moments later, the sound of knives on glass echoed throughout the hall as Mina and Axel stood up. They made all the right gestures, embarrassed hand waving, playfully reluctant submission, a long and loving kiss that elicited exclamations and gasps before walking up to the microphone set up next to the table. Axel stood silently next to Mina while she spoke. She was eloquent and sweet, thanking her parents for paying for the wedding, Axel's parents for their support, All the guests from afar who had come such a long way just to celebrate the fact that they would be having government-sanctioned sex with each other for the rest of their lives. Wonderful, ideal life. And then she told them what I did. The best wedding party we could have asked for. I have to especially thank one of my bridesmaids. Not that you all weren't absolutely wonderful, but, Cecily, can you stand up for a second? I, oh my God. She was going to tell everyone. She knew, she heard me, and she was going to tell everyone in the room that I was in love with Axel, that I thought about them making love, that I was obsessed, and I was weird, and I was dirty and weird and wrong and... Cecily. I looked at her for a moment, stiffened by nerves. Mina gently motioned for me to stand up. I clumsily rose to my feet, tense, ready to run away the moment she revealed my secrets to everyone. If you don't know my best friend Cecily Larch, you're hurting yourself. Cecily is the sweetest, kindest, most caring person I know. She's a brilliant, creative, and incredibly talented poet. Mina beamed as she looked at me from that spot where she stood. And if it weren't for Cecily, neither of us would be here today. Cecily, thank you for introducing me to the love of my life. You brought me and Axel together, and I am so grateful for that. You're welcome. Raise your glasses to my beautiful bridesmaid, Cecily. I clumsily raised my hand in the air and waved to all the guests. Warmth surged through me, reddening my bones, burning my muscles, and staining my skin. Need to hug her now, you need to hug mine now, move your damn legs. Mina opened her arms as I hurried towards her, hugging me as flashes flashed around us, capturing memories like mice in traps. She hugged me, turning her head to say something in my ear. Thank you so much. Love you to bits. And I swallowed, trying to pretend that the emotions eating me up inside were happiness and joy, and not horror and obsession. I owe you everything. Axel's voice was quiet, even, but not devoid of emotion. I tilted my neck back to meet his gaze. I'm happy for you both, I whispered. It would be strange if I hugged Mina and didn't hug Axel. I forced myself not to linger, forced myself to stand still, not shake, look normal, act normal, be normal for at least 5 damn seconds. Cecily, everyone is watching. For a moment, just a moment, a beautiful, clear, sane moment, I thought everything would be okay. It came from nowhere and went to nowhere, the wind again, destroying the wall I had built because it was no longer needed. He loved her. She loved him. What more could I want for the man I loved and my best friend? They were happy, and I was. I wasn't happy, but maybe one day I will be. It was like a fog rising, as if the world had become brighter, as if the dandelions had been cut and cleared, and I could breathe, I could think. I wasn't crazy Cecily, I was just me. Nobody could read my damn mind. What paranoid nonsense. I looked at Mina. Axel stood next to her, his hand resting on the podium, the gold ring on his finger glistening as he tapped his fingers. Knock, 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 knock. My jaw twitched as I echoed the knocks. I couldn't stop myself. I couldn't control my fingers. Knock, 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 knock. The moment of clarity became foggy again, not as much as before, but no longer crystal clear. When Mina finished speaking, I politely applauded along with everyone else. The clink of knives on glass sounded throughout the hall. Axel pulled Mina's face to his, and I left the table again. Mina found me in the wardrobe. Her voice floated among the hanging clothes, winding between them like the wind through the trees. Cecily? I held my breath, hoping she wouldn't look behind the second row of coats, praying she wouldn't see me sitting in the corner on the floor with tears in my eyes. There were 1,000 reasons why I didn't want to be found, and most of them had to do with my feelings for Axel. A few of them were because it was Mina's wedding day, and she shouldn't have to deal with a crying bridesmaid. This was supposed to be her day. When she appeared at the end of the row of coats, I thought that maybe she would just walk past me. Perhaps I could walk behind the pile of rags in the corner, a sad, forgotten lump of fabric, invisible and imperceptible, worth more as a mere pile of rags than with my inclusion. What are you? Are you crying? No. I wiped my cheeks furiously as Mina moved down the row. the skirt of her dress trailing behind her. "Cecily, what's wrong?" "Nothing." "You're lying," she said good-naturedly. Before I knew what was happening, she was down on the floor next to me, her skirt flying around her legs as she settled down on the ground. "Mina, your dress." "It's just a dress," she said, and took my hand. "Why are you crying?" "Because you married the only man I ever loved, ever thought about, and I can't have him, and it hurts, Mina, it hurts like hell. It would be easier to just die. That would be enough." "Cecily." "If you can hear me, Mina, why should I say it out loud?" She looked at me, silently, without reaction. My face turned red. "Crazy fucking Cecily. It's your wedding day," I croaked. "Do not worry about it." "You're my best friend," she whispered. "Please tell me. You don't. You know." She knows. "Don't be angry, but it's because you. Are you lonely?" "Yes," I breathed. "Of course. I wish I had someone like, I mean, not like Axel, obviously, but I wish I had what you have with him." "Well played, Cecily. It didn't sound suspicious at all. You're a fucking idiot." She pretended to take my words at face value and put her arm around my shoulder. "I'm sorry," she purred. "I know it must be hard." "Please don't apologize," I said. "It's your wedding day, and I'm so happy for you. I just needed a moment. Let's spend this moment together. I need a break from the chaos, too." She sat with me for a minute, and then another, her closeness comforting. I rested my head on her shoulder as we sat on the floor of the closet, listening to her breathing, convincing myself that if I couldn't have him, at least it was Mina. "I'll find you a guy," she suddenly said. "What?" I straightened up, turning my head to look at Mina. She smiled, her eyes sparkling as she took my hand. "On a date. I know the perfect person." She really knew the perfect person, but I doubted that she would arrange a date for me with her husband. However, I squeezed her hand, smiled, and said I liked it. The man she introduced me to was the exact opposite of Axel, if Axel was the exact opposite of himself in every way. Where Axel had eyes of ice, Blaine's were warm and hazel. Axel's hair was the darkest shade of red that could still be called red. Blaine's hair looked like it was spun from sun rays and gold. Axel was tall, gloomy, dark. Blaine was big, funny, and meaningful. Blaine was everything I thought was right for me before Axel. After Axel, he was acceptable. My feelings for Blaine were difficult to describe in words. I couldn't say that I loved him. What I knew as love was meant for Axel. This feeling was not love either, not really abnormal love, but I did not know what love was. I couldn't know what love is. However, Blaine was there. He was attractive enough, seemed kind enough, was good enough in bed, that I really couldn't complain. Mina introduced us 2 weeks after the wedding. They worked together before Mina opened her studio, teaching various fitness classes at the same gym. Mina taught yoga. Blaine taught various classes related to strength training. We met for dinner at a bar near my basement apartment. I was supposed to meet him at 7:30, but I went to the bar closer to 8. "Sorry I'm late," I said. Blaine smiled at me across the table. "No problem. Are you late to work?" "No, I just didn't want to come." "Yeah, something like that." "It happens. I hope you don't mind, but I ordered a drink while I was waiting." "Not at all." I called the waitress. "Let me catch up with you." He laughed, lightly and joyfully. "That's what I like to hear." We ate and talked. Well, Blaine spoke. I listened, lost in thought about the topics being discussed, until he frowned and tapped the table. "Hey, if you don't like this date, that's fine, but—" "I like it," I said quickly. My face turned red, and I twirled my fingers on the table. "Just sorry. Had a rough day. I think I miss you." "You're a little quiet. It makes me want to know what's on your mind." He smiled, his teeth almost sparkling from the charm he tried to radiate. I bit my lip, smiling, and Blaine must have thought his charm had worked. In fact, it only convinced me that Blaine couldn't read my mind, and therefore he might actually be the perfect man for me. We had some more drinks, and I started talking a little, telling him about my writing and work and how it was all I really had. We talked about movies and TV shows. I asked him about books, but Blaine said he didn't read much, and we drank more and more and more until several hours passed and we left the bar staggering. So, Blaine said. I put my arm around his shoulder. We both leaned on each other so as not to fall on the sidewalk. There, I said. Huh? I live there. I pointed in the general direction of my house. Are you inviting me to your place? No, I'm telling you to come to me. We both laughed hysterically and swayed along the sidewalk. He followed me, lips pressed together in a kiss as the basement door slammed shut behind us. Before I could turn on the light, he began to take off my jacket, sliding it off my arms as I tugged at the hem of his shirt. Damn, you're impatient, he whispered as I gave in to his shirt and began unbuckling his belt. Is this a complaint? The answer was a hand suddenly grabbing my breast, squeezing tightly as I gasped in his mouth. We pushed through the dark basement towards my bed, clothes scattered here and there as we undressed each other. He reached for the light as we crossed the bedroom, but I grabbed his wrist. I like the dark, I whispered. He laughed and his hands found my bra strap and unclasped it. A bit of a pervert, Cecily. You don't know half of it. Can I stay the night? He whispered. Yes, I said. He stayed that night and the next night, and after that he complained that it was too hot in my basement and suggested that I come to him next time. I agreed, and from then on we spent every few nights together in his apartment. He wasn't Axel. No one else was Axel, but I couldn't have Axel. Instead, I settled down with Blaine, settled into comfort and acceptable sex, and an easy, casual relationship. He was good to me, mostly, and I tried to be good to him. We started seeing Mina and Axel more often. Mina regularly invited us to dinner, or we went to the movies together. Blaine and Axel got along well enough, although Axel was so quiet that it was hard to tell if Blaine actually liked him. Every time we went out together, I tried to hold Blaine's hand and kiss him as often as I could without it seeming intrusive. It didn't prove anything to anyone but myself, and since it didn't really prove anything to me, I wasn't sure why I was doing it. I just needed to show myself that I was with Blaine, only Blaine, and that Axel was never an option. It wasn't a cure for my illness, but at least I could control the symptoms. I still pictured Axel almost every time Blaine and I made love, but the pain began to fade, then just become a quiet tingle in the back of my mind whenever I saw him. 6 months have passed. Mina and Axel bought a house together and moved out of the apartment we shared. Mina's studio opened and was a resounding success. Axel was Axel. He didn't talk much to anyone and didn't talk to me at all. I was still working at the art store. I dated Blaine because it was convenient. Because it was convenient, I felt comfortable. Because I felt comfortable, I didn't notice any subtle changes. He wanted to have sex all the time. Every time I saw him, he wanted to have sex. It didn't matter if I was tired or hadn't showered or whatever. That didn't stop Blaine. It was easier to just let him, so I thought about Axel. I didn't notice how he sighed heavily, how his touch became harder and harder, trying to get me to react, trying to pull me out of the place of numbness. I was lost in my thoughts. For hours and hours I thought about Axel. It didn't really hurt anymore. It was almost a comfort. It was like pouring milk into coffee before adding sugar. It was what I always did. It never occurred to me to add sugar before milk, just as it never occurred to me to stop thinking about Axel. Even seeing him in person was no longer difficult. His brightness faded, the fire of his hair dimmed, and the ice of his eyes melted until he really seemed gray to me. Everyone seemed gray to me, gray and boring and uninspiring. What is this? Blaine asked one night, picking up a notebook that was sitting on his coffee table. Poems, I said. Yours? I shrugged. I tried to write. He leafed through the book, raising eyebrow after eyebrow as he read my words. Are they good? I shrugged again. They were terrible, but Blaine didn't know enough about poetry, prose, or language in general to have the slightest idea of what good poetry was. Are you going to publish them? Probably not. Maybe we should think about a career or something. I didn't answer and Blaine muttered, rolling his eyes. Ready? He asked a little later. I didn't move from the sofa. Yes. Again, he raised his eyebrow at me. Cecily, I wish you would try at least a little harder when we go out in public, you know. These words should have hurt me. Instead, they were left emotionless. I shrugged again, went into his bathroom, cleaned myself up a bit, and then joined him in the kitchen. Acceptable? I asked. What's wrong with you lately? Are you mad at me or something? I shook my head. He sighed. Okay, let's go. He drove me to the restaurant where we met Mina and Axel. After he parked the car, he grabbed my wrist before I could open the door. Listen. His voice was stern, almost angry, and his fingers squeezed the thin bones in my wrist so tightly that I screamed. I don't know what's on your mind, but cheer up. Don't embarrass me in front of Mina and Axel, got it? I looked at him for a minute, a long minute, a minute in which I tried to evoke some feeling. Anger or fear or humiliation or confusion. Anything. A spark of anger flared, almost flared, but died down into apathy when I looked into Blaine's eyes. Got it, I muttered. He let go of my wrist, and I opened the car door. Mina and Axel were already sitting at the table. Blaine changed as soon as we saw them. How's my favorite yoga teacher? He said cheerfully as Mina stood up to hug him. Great, thanks. How's my favorite fitness trainer? He muttered something, and she laughed before releasing him from the hug. Cecily, how are you? Fine. She hugged me, then looked me up and down, her eyes clouded with concern. Fine, she repeated. Yes, okay, I said. Axel surprised us all by greeting us warmly, smiling as he stood up to shake Blaine's hand. Then, without warning, he hugged me. The numbness went away, the world filled with color, and my heart began to beat wildly as his body touched mine. 6 months of pain, love, desire, and obsession came back suddenly and powerfully, rushing over me, surrounding me, and passing through me like a waterfall. Oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no, oh no. A high-pitched laugh burst from my chest. Blaine's face twisted in disgust as he watched, and Axel let go of me. Sorry, I babbled. It was unexpected. Hello, Axel. Good to see you. Sorry. You just surprised me, that's all. Nothing. Nothing like that. Sorry. Mina laughed. What are you sorry? For a strange laugh. Things. I felt my cheeks turn red and fell into the empty chair next to Blaine. Axel didn't seem to notice my awkward state, or if he did, he ignored it and sat back down. The air around him seemed to pulsate and vibrate, radiating possibility, and he looked at Mina with longing. She caught his eye, and her face tightened before she laughed again. Just tell them. We have news, Axel said immediately. Mina touched his arm, and he jumped slightly. After a moment, he relaxed, turning his palm up to clasp it with hers. News, I repeated. Mina pursed her lips. A hidden secret sparkled in her golden brown eyes, and she looked at Axel. We're expecting a baby, he said. Child. It may have just been in my head, but it felt like the world stood still for a moment. A beat, a heartbeat, a long moment of processing, turning the words around in my head. Baby, 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 they're expecting a baby. Blaine looked at Mina. I knew this because I snapped out of my stupor first and let out another hysterical laugh as I grabbed his forearm. Baby, I can't believe it. My voice was shrill, shaky, shocked. Blaine came to his senses when I looked at him, tore his eyes away from Mina, and smiled widely. Damn, man, congratulations. He jumped up from his seat and patted Axel on the back, then leaned over and kissed Mina on the cheek. Congratulations, Mommy. She cried and dabbed at the corner of her eye with a napkin. It's still very early, she said quietly. It's very early, so, don't tell anyone yet, okay? Just in case, if something happens. Nothing will happen. Axel's voice was low and booming as he squeezed Mina's hand. There was a tiny bit of shyness among them, the smallest hint that something was wrong. Or maybe the dam that was holding my emotions back burst, flooding me with feelings, bringing back all the sadness and obsession and suspicion, and adding a few new things like jealousy and despair and longing, so much longing. It was well possible that I was just imagining the sudden tension, praying that there was a crack there, and then wallowing in the guilt I felt for wanting such a thing. I spent the rest of the evening absorbed in thoughts of children. Children, children, children. I couldn't imagine what Mina and Axel's children would be like. Will they have Axel's hair? Probably not. The red color would be lost under Mina's jeans, just like his blue eyes. His fire and ice will be lost, drowned in the enveloping waters that make up Mina. Maybe the baby would have Axel's face, but I couldn't reconcile Axel's strong bones with Mina's earthy tones. If Axel and I had children, they would be beautiful. His red hair with my green eyes, or my black hair with his blue eyes. We would have children who looked like characters from fairy tales, children with flawless pale skin and beautiful faces and small curved noses. People would look at our children, extraordinary little creatures of unearthly beauty, and they would be jealous and amazed and delighted that one little creature could be so perfectly formed. If Blaine and I had kids, they'd be cute, I guess. Cute in the way that all mothers think their children are cute. The evening passed in the blink of an eye, and when I finally got the image of tiny, fairy-like children with red hair and green eyes out of my head, Blaine was pulling into the parking lot of his apartment. "You're staying?" he asked. I nodded and followed him inside. "So this is interesting," I said casually as we dusted off our coats. Blaine chuckled in response. "What do you think, boy or girl?" He shrugged. "What do you think it will look like?" "Probably like Mina, I think, but maybe it is." "Would you just shut up about the damn baby, Cecily?" I pulled back, my mouth hanging open and unspoken words hanging from my lips. Blaine looked at me with cold and angry eyes before laughing awkwardly. "I can't keep you talking all damn night, and now you just want to talk about the baby." I just... SHHH. He grabbed me roughly and kissed me so hard that I thought my lips were bruised, cracked, or bleeding. I resisted, pressing on his chest. "Blaine, wait. Don't keep me waiting." I had been so wrapped up in myself all evening that I didn't notice the change in Blaine. I didn't notice the tension running through his muscles, the whiteness of his knuckles, the hard line of his jaw as he clenched his teeth. It wasn't until those tight muscles grabbed me in his arms that I really noticed. "Stop," I breathed. He didn't. "Blaine," Stopey shouted and pushed him as hard as I could. "I don't remember what happened between us. Maybe I don't want to remember." The door slammed behind me, and I ran, I rushed down the corridor and up the stairs and into the street past passers-by. My shoes clicked on the pavement, creating a rhythm of fear and anger, my thoughts humming in the background in a twisted a cappella. He hit me, I hit him, he hit me, I hit him, he hit. The words swirled and rose, bubbling and boiling and spilling out of my eyes. When I finally had to stop and catch my breath, leaning over and breathing deeply while my lungs burned and my body screamed, they coalesced into one clear thought. Axel wouldn't do this to me. I hid in my basement for a week. My boss fired me after I didn't show up for work 3 days in a row. He left a message on my voicemail because I refused to answer my calls. Mina called several times. I didn't answer her either. The first message she left was full of sympathy. "Hi, Cecily, this is Mina. Sorry I didn't get through. Blaine says you two broke up, and I just wanted to see how you were. I'm so sorry it didn't work out for you. You seemed so happy the other time, but you gotta do what's best for you. Call me back when you can and let me know you're okay. Love you." The next message arrived 2 days later. "Hey, Cecily, it's Mina again. Just checking on you. Blaine is also really upset about your breakup and says he can't get through to you either. I'll come see you later, okay? I'm worried about you." That night, the message was impatient and annoyed. "Cecily, this is Mina. I know you're home. I can see you through the window. Can you please open the door? The next day. Hi, this is Mina. Look, I don't know. I don't know what happened between you and Blaine. Obviously, more than Blaine told. I saw him today, Cecily. Cecily, I'm worried about you. Please answer. Please call me back. After deleting the last message, I wondered vaguely when Mina started talking to Blaine so much. Perhaps Blaine was trying to do some damage control. I didn't answer the door when Mina arrived because the left side of my face was still purple. By the time the swelling had subsided enough for me to cover up the redness with makeup, it had been almost a week since the night Blaine hit me. For the first few days, I huddled in my bedroom, didn't sleep, didn't eat, terrified that Blaine might come. I sat in the corner, clutching my cell phone to my chest, staring intently at the door and jumping at every sound, be it real or imaginary. I dozed off on the third day after I was fired, but before Mina's second call. When I woke up, I crawled into bed and slept restlessly, taking several naps over the course of 2 days. I stood up when I heard a knock on the door, but when I saw myself in the mirror near the entrance, I turned and crawled back into the comfortable darkness of my room. When the guilt for worrying Mina outweighed the shame and fear and anger, I stood up, took a shower, put on a layer of makeup that didn't quite hide the bruise, but was better than nothing, got dressed, combed my hair, and cautiously peered out the door, looking around the yard before run to your car and go to Mina. When I arrived at Mina and Axel's house, I parked on the street, walked to the front door, and raised my hand to knock, but stopped. The open window on the second floor emanated a familiar melody, the familiar rhythm of the bed hitting the wall and muffled moans. I should have called first. My face turned red, and I turned to go back to the car, but hesitated. It was a familiar song, but not their song. I knew. I've been listening to Axel and Mina make love for years, and I knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that what I was listening to was a cover of their song, a version that was almost but not quite the same, and Axel definitely wasn't on that remix. My heart raced as I took a step back, and then another. I nearly fell down the steps before hurrying back to the car, unable to believe what I was hearing. I sat in the front seat, lowered and looking at the front door of their house. She can't cheat on him. Impossible, I whispered. Mina is not a traitor. Mina was. Mina loved him. She was supposed to love him, she married him, and he was. He was Axel. She married fucking Axel and cheated on him. I had to be wrong, I reasoned. Maybe Axel had a cold or something, and he just didn't sound like his usual self. I believed that about as much as I believed that Blaine should be given a second chance. Still, I sat in the car and looked at their house, waited, watched, prayed that what I heard was not true. She could not. When the front door opened and Blaine came out, I bit my lip so hard that it bled like love, like roses, like the blackness of betrayal and all-consuming rage. I sat lower in the seat, visible only with my forehead through the window, my eyes watching as Blaine walked to his car, got in, and drove away. He didn't notice my car and didn't see me. However, it was a long time before I was able to lift my fingers from the steering wheel and get out, unsteady on my feet as I walked. When Mina opened the door, she stared at me for a moment. Her lips were still slightly swollen, her hair artificially disheveled around her head. Cecily? Hello. She hugged me and pulled me towards her. I smelled him on her, the smell of sex, bitter and musky and wrong. She should have smelled like Axel, not Blaine. Come in. I was so worried about you. I followed her into the house, barely listening as she spoke. She brought me a glass of water, and we sat down at the kitchen table. How do you feel? She asked. She put her hand on her stomach. There was no visible rounding there yet, but she smiled modestly. Okay, for now. It's still so early. Is Axel home? She tensed. No, why? My heart sank as the last straw slipped from my fingers. I need to talk to you. Only you. Mina relaxed. Her face was as welcoming and calming as ever, but I knew that underneath that beauty there was a snake. Blaine hit me, I said. She must have recoiled or turned pale or looked shocked or something like that when I told her what happened. Instead, she looked at me calmly, still trying to maintain the sense of integrity she always had. What is he? He hit me. After dinner with you and Axel last week. Mina nodded slowly, pursing her lips. Blaine said, he said you got a little aggressive when he tried to break up with you. There was no point in denying the truth of this statement. I hit him back, but only after he hit me. He never tried to break up with me. Precisely, are you sure? Because I know sometimes you don't. Well, do you think I'm crazy? Do you think I'm lying? She grimaced. No, I just mean, you do not believe me. I believe, she exclaimed. But Blaine, I told you, I saw it on his face. Yes, it was from me. I pulled the napkin from the holder in the middle of the table, dipped it into the glass of water, and wiped the base off my cheek. I did it after he did it. Precisely. I'm not saying you're lying, but you're sleeping with him, so you're on his side. Her mouth dropped open in surprise. What? She finally said. I saw him leave. This does not mean I heard you two having sex. You couldn't. I heard Mina, I really heard you, and I saw him leave, and I can't believe you did that. She was silent. The calm, beautiful, peaceful Mina I knew was gone. For a moment, for one fleeting breath, her golden brown eyes became liquid, dangerous, beautiful, and terrifying before she began to cry. It's not that simple, she whispered. So you admit it? Yes, she hissed. I admit it. It's just, you don't understand. How long, Mina? Were you sleeping with him when we met? She shook her head. How long? A few months. Months. She did not insult me, pretending that it was the first time, that it was a mistake, that it was a moment of passion when she was not thinking. She told the truth. She started sleeping with him while he was sleeping with me. Why did you do this? Her jaw tensed. She looked almost regretful, almost remorseful, almost sad, sad in the way a hyena might look after tearing the flesh from the bones of a gazelle. It's not. You two always seem so happy together, she whispered. You were always touching each other and kissing. I wanted that. Axel, he's not the person I fell in love with. The room spun around me. How could she had Axel? On what planet did it make sense that she would want Blaine just because we kissed in front of her, because he was mine, because she was? How could Mina be jealous? She had Axel. How is it? You've only been married for 6 months. 6 months, Mina, and you're cheating on him. You will not understand. Her voice was weak, wavering more than mine on a normal day. She sounded broken, truly broken, and for a moment I felt sorry for her. She was my best friend. Something was wrong, something was causing distress and pain and problems in her life, and didn't I owe it to her to help her solve it? Didn't I owe it to her to understand her? I might have considered it if it weren't for the fact that she was hurting Axel. So you're cheating on him. Is this your decision about some bullshit you think you're having? You do not understand. She looked at me angrily. So explain it to me. I can't. I looked at her, at the hand resting lightly on her stomach, and the realization came to me. Oh God, Mina, the baby. No, she interrupted. This is Axel's. I looked at her, silently, trying not to judge, trying to suppress the anger I felt on Axel's behalf, trying to refrain from shaking her and screaming, telling her what an idiot she was for cheating on the model of perfection with Blaine, of all people. Mina, why? I insisted again. She swallowed and risked a glance at me. There was powerlessness, sadness, and lost regret in her eyes, and a darkness that I had never seen before. Remember when I asked you, you know how people get upset and sometimes well, you just did it too. You were upset with Blaine and you. Upset? He hit me, Mina. Yeah, but you kind of lost it, you know? What are you trying to say? You know Axel has changed lately. She looked at me pleadingly. You know, You asked him about this, remember? On before the wedding. There was a scratch on his neck. He said it was from the haircut and told me to forget about it. He said I was wrong. Of course I remember. Couldn't he? It couldn't be. He could not. He wouldn't. But I had to ask. I had to, because it was the only explanation I could come up with that would justify what mine did. Is he hitting you? I whispered. No, she raised her head. He would never. He would never lay a hand on me, you know? I recoiled, stupidly startled by the sudden fury in her voice. This was not the Mina I knew. This was not Mina, my friend, my neighbor, the woman who was beautiful, sweet, and peaceful. When did she become this? When did she turn from my Mina to the crying, angry, shaking woman in front of me? Even worse, why didn't I notice? I was supposed to be her friend. You should tell him, I said. Mina, you can't hide it. Should I tell him? She laughed, sounding like crinkled plastic bags, and shook her head. So you can comfort him and beg at his feet for him to finally pay attention to you. I swallowed the pain and shook my head. The tingling in my body intensified, spreading through my toes and heels, up my spine and through my ribs, squeezing my lungs and stomach like a vice. She knows. Of course she knew. This isn't about me. If you're not going to tell Axel that you cheated on him with Blaine, I will. Her eyes were wild as they darted around the kitchen, and I watched as her face softened. It changed, transformed, turned from a snake into a helpless baby deer. I frowned, confused, as she let out a subtle sob, her voice filled with a deep pain that wasn't there before. She hesitated, then shook her head and sobbed. Precisely, why do you say that? Because you. I'd like to know the answer to that, too. The glass of water tipped over as I spun around in my chair, spinning towards the soft, gravelly voice behind me. Axel stood in the kitchen doorway, the bag he usually carried to work with his laptop hanging from his shoulder. He looked at me, eyes hard and focused and filled with pain, and my mouth fell open. He looked at me for a long moment, then turned his gaze to his wife. Mina. She didn't cry dramatically or scream or protest. She sobbed again, shook her head, and took a deep breath. Precisely, I don't know how we hurt you, but threatening me like that, it's beyond the pale. I know Blaine broke up with you, but I had nothing to do with it, and for you to come here and try to hurt my marriage, I thought we were friends. I don't. This isn't. What? Axel said. Mina looked up at him, her eyes sparkling. She said she was going to tell you that I cheated on you, so she could. She paused, biting her lip. Precisely, we can help you. You can't believe this, I said desperately, turning to Axel. I heard them, Axel, and I saw him leave. He looked from me to Mina. She stood up from the chair and put a gentle hand on my shoulder. I know this is hard for you, she said quietly, but we know how you feel about Axel. I'm so sorry, Cecily. I didn't know it was that bad. We didn't think you'd do something like that. My face turned red, the flames swirled inside me, turning my skin into hot coals. I was still looking at Axel, and when his gaze returned to me, full of pity and pain, I realized that I had lost. I'm not making this up, I said desperately. I don't care what you think. If you know, I don't care. She's cheating on you. Which is more likely? Mina's voice was gentle, making the harshness of her words even more painful. That I'm deceiving you, or that Cecily is in love with you, because we already know the answer to that. Axel didn't answer. She's jealous about the baby, Axel. She told me. Mina stroked my shoulder again. You're not alone, Cecily. We'll be there for you. We can help. I know a good doctor who can. He can help. My mouth opened and closed. Axel's face turned red, disgust and alien embarrassment were visible in his eyes. For a moment, all we could hear was the steady drip of the water I'd spilled onto the floor. Drip, 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 drip. I'm leaving, I finally whispered. Let us help you, Mina begged, sincere and deceitful and disgustingly kind. I shook her hand off me, disgusted by the snake-like way she had touched me, and stood up to walk past Axel. He didn't move from his place in the passage to the kitchen until I approached. "Sorry," I said coldly. Axel moved to the side, but grabbed my elbow before I walked past. His eyes fell on the bruise that covered my cheekbone. "What happened to your face, Cecily?" I expected the inevitable surge of electricity, that pathetic joy that always accompanied his touch, but it did not come. It might have been the first time I looked straight into Axel's eyes without feeling that falling sensation, that blossoming of obsession when his gaze fell on me. Instead, I felt humiliated and rejected. Mad Cecily, possessed Cecily, sick Cecily with a bruise on her face, uncomprehending and naive and stupid, stupid, stupid. "He hit me," I said, and pushed his hand away. Neither Axel nor Mina followed me as I left, quietly closing the door behind me. I didn't have enough friends for news to spread like wildfire. They spread rather like melting wax, dripping and congealing, cracking, the truth burning until it accumulated into a rough, uneven heap. However, Mina's story spread among the few friends I had. They made sure to tell me how outraged they were by her, how generously she offered to help me after I had done so much to hurt her, how selfish and creepy I had acted. Then the messages stopped. My phone stopped vibrating with angry texts and mocking voicemails, and I was left alone. I applied for unemployment benefits, but was denied. I considered Mina's suggestion to visit a doctor and decided against the idea myself. I didn't have the money for this, and I certainly wasn't going to ask Mina for help. I sat in my basement for a week. The air was hot and sticky. It enveloped me, holding me, surrounding me with a web, but I was so cold. I pulled on several sweaters and covered myself with blankets, sweat dripping from my forehead and soaking the fabric around me, but I couldn't stop shivering. I thought about the child and cried, realizing that I would probably never meet him. I thought about Axel and curled up into a ball, smaller and smaller, the weight of the blankets not enough to crush me the way I wanted. The bruise faded until it was just a barely visible stain on my cheek, like paint smeared onto skin and then washed away. I woke up one morning, covered in sweat, my hair stuck to my face, my lips chapped and dry from dehydration. I untangled myself from the blankets, took off 2 of my 3 sweaters, and weakly made my way to the kitchen. I let the water run while I filled and drank glass after glass. I drank until my stomach was full, bloated with liquid, and my skin felt cold and clammy. It's been 2 or 3 days since I've eaten. There wasn't much food in the refrigerator, but there were a couple of cans of ravioli in the pantry. I opened one and ate it cold while I heated the other on the stove. After burning my mouth with the second can, I took off the rest of my clothes and went to the shower. I stood under the water until it turned cold, then dried my hair and put on clean clothes. I collected the blankets and sweaters and washed them. I wiped down the countertops, swept the floor, opened the window, and lit a candle. I did all this mechanically, my thoughts empty and pale, welcoming the numbness and using it to free myself from the prison in which I had put myself. I didn't know why that day was the day it took over, why it was the day I started to pull myself together. I didn't know why the sick thoughts in my head became silent. All I knew was that I was slowly, gradually, painfully making my way out of the cage that was twisting me. I had to understand that by freeing myself, I became vulnerable to being caught by someone else. When he knocked on my door, I had just finished making the bed. My shoulders tensed as fear crept up my spine. This couldn't be good news. There was no good news. I was sure it was either my landlord threatening to evict me, or Mina coming to brag, or another friend coming to rebuke me, or Blaine coming to do something. I cautiously approached the door, quietly, curious, but scared, only intending to peek through the peephole and then sneak away as soon as I found out who it was. He knocked again, and I almost screamed. "Cicely, I know you're home." The words were muffled, but it was him. Quiet and even, but not devoid of emotions. Deep, echoing, disturbing. The only voice I would open the door for. However, after I unlocked the bolt, I slowly opened the door. I looked out and saw him, and then forgot that I was trying to open it slowly when I saw his face. There was a bruise on his cheekbone, an almost perfect mirror image of the faded one on my cheekbone. There were also bruises scattered across his forehead and other cheek. Angry red scratches adorned his brow and neck, and his lower lip was swollen and split. His eyes met mine, watching as I looked him over, watching the stunned shock flash across my face. Axel, mindlessly, I reached for it, not sure if it was real, needing touch to know for sure. He was real, but I couldn't find out on my own terms. I screamed from surprises as he grabbed me, surprised by the way his arms wrapped around mine, and then his lips pressed against mine. The swollen area that was broken and swollen should have been painful, but he kissed me hard. Axel kissed me. Axel. I answered instinctively, my mind going blank, voices and anger and horror silent as I returned his kisses. It was everything I wanted, his body pressed against mine as he claimed my lips. My body rejoiced, caught fire, yearned for more, and I gave in. I kissed him, I touched him, I ran my hands up his arms and up his neck. My fingers touched the raised scratches on his throat, and I froze. Axel, I muttered, trying to turn my head away. He guided my lips back to his, and I tried to pull away again. Axel, stop. He stopped, his eyes opening as he stopped kissing me, and it took all the strength I had ever had or would ever have again to push him away. Mental strength, at least. Axel didn't move away from me, but he stopped touching me. He silently watched as I touched my fingers with my lips, trying to understand what had just happened. "What are you doing?" I whispered. His jaw tensed, but he didn't answer. "Axel, what the hell is going on?" He responded by confessing. "I know she was lying. She's sleeping with Blaine." This answered some, but not all. "Why are you here?" The light reflected in his eyes, flickering like the sun on a dagger. "She hurt you too. You never cared about it. Don't you want to take revenge on her?" My mouth dropped open in surprise. Axel took this as agreement and pressed his lips to mine again, insistently and decisively, and this time I did not push him away. However, I also did not respond to kisses. "I'm not like that," I countered. "Help me," he whispered. "Help me take revenge on her." He had one hand on my cheek. The other touched my waist, the place where my waist narrowed, and slowly moved downwards. I trembled at his touch, I responded to his kisses, I sighed, and then retreated again. "I'm not like that. Don't force me to be like that. She was terrible to you. No one will judge you." His body was hard against me, his fingers cold as they slid under the hem of my shirt and caressed my stomach. Every nerve in my body was tense, desperately telling me to stop coaxing him, to let him touch me, to allow myself to give in and take what I had wanted for so long. My conscience did not experience the same urgent impulse. "Stop it." Tears began to well up in my eyes, not because of what he was doing, but because I couldn't let him. My Axel wouldn't do that. I won't let him be that kind of person. He stopped with his hand on my rib, his eyes darting upward as he stopped kissing me. "What?" "I won't help you cheat on your wife." His jaw twitched. "Precisely, she's sleeping with. She's sleeping with Blaine, I know, and she told everyone I was crazy, and she's right, but I won't help you punish her. You wouldn't do that." "How the hell do you know what I would do?" His words were cold, hard, bitter as a blizzard. He wasn't himself. I would know better than anyone, because I myself am not sure that I even have a sane mind. "What happened to your face?" I asked. He didn't answer. His eyes told me a story, prompted me to remember the little things I saw along the way. A scratch on his neck. The way he flinched when Mina suddenly touched his arm. You know how upset people get, and sometimes they. "Please don't tell anyone. I just can't. I didn't want to." But I interrupted her. "He'll never lay a hand on me, you know." He wouldn't do it, but she could. My hand was trembling, unstable as I raised it to his face. With fingers lighter than the breeze, I touched the swollen skin on his cheek. "Mina did this?" My Axel would nod or shake his head, confirming or denying if I were right. The Axel I knew I wanted would be embarrassed, ashamed, just like I was when Blaine hit me. I would tell this Axel that everything is okay. I would kiss every bruise and scratch and whisper comforting words to him. My Axel was not there. Axel, who pinned me to the wall, was a wounded animal, defensive and angry and sick. He pushed my hand away and pinned me against the wall, his body pressed firmly against mine, his eyes cold and his lips curled. Axel, I. Don't ask, he growled. He tried to kiss me again, but I turned my head, his lips brushing against the faded bruise on my cheek. Don't do this. You don't want this. You do not know. It was the only time I actually heard him raise his voice, and I trembled as I looked at him, eyes wide. What, she can be a cheater and I can't? Should I always have morals? You're expecting a baby with her. It's not easy. Everyone knows you're obsessed with me, Cecily. Let's get this over with. You've wanted this for years. I know you've wanted it. It's just, go to hell. My voice was strong for the first time, and he stopped, staring at me. I pushed him away from me as hard as I could. Go to hell, Axel. This is not what I wanted. He took a step back, then another, and laughed dryly. You were obsessed with me. Are you pushing me away? I'm obsessed with who you were not. Not this. I won't sleep with you just because you want to get back at your damn wife. Tears rolled down my cheeks, burning, leaving burns, and I pointed to the door. I may be crazy, but I'm not a bad person. I'm not here for you to use me as a damn object. I'm human, Axel. Go away. His face darkened. It's not. I didn't mean to. Cecily, I'm sorry. Leave. I waved my hand towards the door again. Rage filled me. This was a new obsession, a stronger obsession, and I almost calmly accepted that it would break me. We all must have some moral principles. The next day, I called the yoga studio from a blocked number and asked for Mina. The receptionist put me on hold, and when Mina answered, I hung up. Then I drove back to Axel and Mina's house. I was pretty sure Axel was at work too, but I knocked on the door anyway and waited a few minutes before starting to look for the spare key. Axel was smart enough not to leave it under the welcome mat, but Mina always forgot her keys somewhere, so there was always a spare one. I was about to start digging in the flower bed to see if there was a fake stone there when I noticed a bronze door knocker on the door. Who uses a door knocker these days? There was a small latch on the hammer, barely noticeable, and when I opened it, the hammer opened. I took the spare key out of the hammer, turned around, picked up my new car, and drove to the nearest hardware store to make a copy of the key. When I returned the old key, used the door knocker to knock on the door again, then tested my new copy in the lock. She worked. I slammed the door and locked it, then headed back to the bus stop and drove home. The next day, I headed back to Axel and Mina's house. Mina's car was in the driveway, so I hid in my car and watched the house for a while. She left about an hour later, and I got out of the car and hurried to the front door. I still knocked on the door before entering, just in case. The house was quiet when I entered. The air almost hissed when I moved him, as if he knew I wasn't supposed to be here. I ignored it and began to quickly search the house, not wanting to spend any more time there than necessary. I didn't know what such evidence looked like. Mina was a hard-hearted bitch, but she wasn't stupid enough to leave a full written confession about how she beat her husband lying around. The search was unsuccessful until I reached the bedroom. Mina has always been a little sloppy. Axel was much neater, but their bedroom looked like a tornado had gone through it. Mina's things were everywhere, On the bed, on the chair, hanging from the dresser drawers, on the floor in the closet. I tried not to touch anything so as not to arouse suspicion, but it was precisely what was not there that told me. Some things were missing, and that gave me a clue. Only half of the drawers were filled with Mina's clothes. The other half was empty. One side of the bed was wrinkled and newly made. On the other lay a stack of clean laundry. There were still a ton of Axel's clothes in the closet, but the missing items spoke for themselves. His favorite sweater, which I knew he would never leave at home. The jacket he always wore. His razor and toothbrush were missing from the bathroom. I pushed the hair straightener away and pulled my hand back with a hiss, realizing that Mina had left it on. She almost burned down our apartment several times doing the same thing. Now that she didn't have a roommate or husband to keep an eye on her, it was a good thing I barged in so soon after she left. Shaking my head, I pulled the plug out of the socket, making sure it wasn't touching anything before leaving their house. I found no evidence of Mina's mistreatment of him, but I was absolutely sure that Axel no longer lived at home. When I returned home that night, I didn't know what to do with the information I found. Of course, Axel didn't live there, but I didn't know where he was. I didn't have any more real information than I did this morning, and if he didn't live there, I wouldn't be able to see anything from watching from the car like I planned. And after all that work to make sure my new cheap car didn't look suspicious on their street. It was easy enough to figure out where he was. I knew where Axel worked. I knew what his car looked like. He didn't know what my new car looked like. All I could do was wait in the parking lot until he got off work the next day, follow him a few cars behind, and continue past the hotel he was staying at. When I got home, I called the hotel, asked for his number, and muffled my voice through my shirt, changing my accent, asking if it was room 492. No, it's 238, he answered quietly. Sorry to bother you, monsieur, I said before hanging up. Light. The next day I dressed carefully. I had one of Blaine's shirts, one I'd borrowed a few months ago when I was late and rushing to work after spending the night at his place. I put it on, tucked into my jeans, and went to Mina's yoga studio. Her car was in the parking lot behind the building, so I parked down the street and walked confidently through the front doors. Welcome to Shanty Yoga, the girl at the reception desk, dressed in a sports top, pleasantly greeted me. Our class has just started, but the next one is in 45 minutes. Actually, I came to Mina, I said. She smiled. Certainly, I'll call her. Before the girl could grab the phone, it rang. She frowned, then picked up the phone. Hello, Mina. Do you have? She paused, listening, then looked at me fearfully. Okay? She hung up and bit her lip. I'm very sorry, but she said you'd better leave. I laughed. Are these her words? The girl didn't say anything, but I knew that Mina had expressed herself completely differently. I looked at the camera behind the counter and smiled, waving my hand in her direction. Tell her that Cecily wants to talk to her. This is urgent. I left as requested, taking out my phone and fumbling with it as I turned around the building. I walked about 10 meters down the alley when Mina jumped out the back door. How dare you, she hissed, walking towards me. This is my business. I put the phone in my shirt pocket and shrugged. When did Axel leave? She stopped, looking at me. Who told you? I shrugged again. Damn it, Cecily, I don't like playing these stupid games. Oh, you don't like it? Sorry, I thought after you tried to convince your husband that I was lying about your affair because I wanted to seduce him, games were yours. She frowned at me, crossing her arms over her chest. And I told you, you don't understand. When did you start hitting him? Her mouth fell open. I don't. I'm not an idiot, Mina. At first, I thought he had a fight with Blaine, but those scratches. Blaine hits. He hits really hard, you know. It doesn't scratch. She looked at me for a long time. You do not understand. Why did you hit him? I did not want to, she hissed. I got angry. But you hit. You didn't mean to, but you hit him. Come on. I hit him. And he should have hit me back. But he didn't. He couldn't. He would never lay a hand on me. And that made me even angrier because his damn morals wouldn't allow him to. He let me hit him and scratch him and yell at him, and he didn't even try to fight back until you came with that bruise on your face and told him I slept with Blaine. Why? Because he's a coward. She suddenly laughed. He's a damn coward, Cecily. He's so madly in love with me that. Well, you should know you're just as in love with him. I remained silent as she laughed again, shaking her head. It was just a mistake, you know. We were arguing and I just, I got so angry. And he just looked at me after I hit him, like a wounded fucking puppy. I felt so sorry for Cecily. I cried and told him to leave, but he didn't leave. And then the next time I hit him harder, and he still just stood there. And then after that it became like a challenge, like he wanted to see how angry I could get. And I tried to tell you because I needed help, but you were so focused on him that you didn't even think. And then you came with Blaine, fucking Blaine, so happy and so. She choked on sobs. I didn't want him to leave. I just wanted him to be a little more courageous, to stop forcing me to do this. Become more courageous? I repeated, trying not to show my disgust. Hitting you won't make him a man, just as your hitting him didn't make him a man. She shook her head. I know this is not normal. I know it's fucking crazy, okay? I know. So why did he leave? He will return. He said he just wanted to take a couple of days to think and decide what we would do next. This is not the end, Cecily. You know he came to me, right? Her hands clenched into fists. I thought she might hit me, and I tensed up, ready for her to swing. But she didn't. You... No. She snorted. I told him no. What a loyal little friend you are, she murmured. It does not matter. He will come back to me. He will believe me when I say I had a miscarriage due to stress, and we will continue to live together without your sick little obsessive face in our lives. I won't lose him. She was deadly serious, serious enough to lunge forward and grab my arm, hissing in my face. Let me go, I said in an even tone. She didn't let me go right away. Then she seemed to remember that I wasn't Axel, that when Blaine hit me, I fought back, and she let go of my hand. You don't deserve him, I said. I thought you deserved it. I thought, if not me, then at least you. But you were never the person I thought you were, right? You've been a fake all along. It's not my fault, you're a fucking crazy idiot. I laughed. No, probably not. She looked confused, then worried, then truly scared as I continued to laugh, shaking my head as I walked away from her down the alley. Your French accent needs work. I shrugged. I could point that out too. Axel snorted and opened the door wide. She's not pregnant, I said when he closed the door. Axel nodded vigorously. I guessed it. When did you find out? 3 days ago. He hesitated, the question of why I waited hanging on his lips, but then he just nodded and shrugged. I'm sorry she hit you. His jaw clenched. The bruises on his face are almost gone, the scratches barely visible on his smooth skin. Why did you come, Cecily? His voice was not harsh, just tired. Telling you that she's not pregnant and that you shouldn't go back to her. And what's next? She'll tell everyone that I hit her, that I cheated on her, that... Hell, she can probably blame me for losing the baby. The ice in his eyes disappeared, replaced by ordinary melancholy. Who will they believe? She doesn't need evidence to ruin my life, and I would need a mountain of evidence to even raise doubts that she's telling the truth. So you will come back. He sighed and shrugged. Yes, maybe. You know better than anyone how. I mean, 2 days, and she's already turned everyone against you. I nodded and looked down. This is all? He asked. Again, not friendly, just tired. Maybe. Can I apologize? I looked into eyes full of sadness, into eyes that carried regret, eyes that looked at me cautiously as they stood in front of me. Eyes that I loved, eyes that I couldn't be angry with, eyes that would never look at me the way they looked at Mina. Although, perhaps it wasn't so bad. You already apologized. This is not enough. I'm sorry. He swallowed hard, his throat muscles tense. I shouldn't have. I mean, what I did was terrible, and what I said was even worse. I'm sorry. You weren't completely wrong. He seemed to have no answer. She said she would ruin my life and yours if I told you that she faked the pregnancy. I'll pretend to be terribly upset when she loses the baby. I wanted to ruin her life for what she did to you." He chuckled, a small smile playing at the corners of his lips. "I'll get back to her, so if you could, don't do it. I would appreciate it." My heart began to beat in my chest. Can I, at least? What? He didn't look when I looked up at him, trying not to sound as desperate as I felt, trying not to look pathetic and failing. If he wasn't going to leave her, I couldn't hurt her without hurting him. I had one option, one small possibility of revenge, a tiny needle prick instead of a sword strike, but revenge still. "Will you sleep with me, please?" His neck snapped towards me, his mouth fell open, and I shifted awkwardly. "Or not," I whispered. "It's just, I'm sorry it was. I shouldn't have." "Sorry." Axel looked mildly amused, raising an eyebrow as I stuttered. "I thought you didn't want to be part of my wife's punishment." "I have changed my mind." He took a step closer. "You said you felt like I was using you, like an object." I trembled and shook my head. "You said that I became a different person, that you don't want this person. I think we've both changed, and I want to." He stood in front of me, inches away from me, and I had to tilt my head back to continue looking into his eyes. "Would it help if I told you that I always thought you were beautiful, even long before you introduced me to her? It is nice of you." "It's true," he whispered. "Why do you think I always asked you to hang out or go out for drinks?" My heart began to beat, sank, beat again, and then sank. "Don't tell me that." He raised his hand to my face, pushing the hair away from my cheek. I shuddered involuntarily. The coldness of his fingers almost burned my hot skin. "It shouldn't hurt you. I just want you to know that this isn't just because of her. I want you." I still thought he was lying, although I didn't know whether he was lying to me or to himself. Whatever it was, it didn't matter. That was enough, and I let him lift my face to his and kiss me again. His lips were soft, much less insistent than the hot, demanding kiss we shared in my basement, and I kissed back breathlessly. After a few moments, it was no longer just kissing. I wrapped my fingers in his hair and kissed him like he was oxygen. He grabbed me around the waist and pulled me towards him, inhaling sharply when I bit his bottom lip. Then he led me, pulling me forward, guiding me towards the bed. I looked at his body as it was finally exposed to me. His skin was perfectly clean, smooth and pale. He was athletic enough, not too muscular, but just enough that I could see the outline of his muscles on his chest and stomach. Axel let me look at him, let me enjoy the sight of his naked body before he pulled me close to him again. I was almost hesitant to touch him, as if he might evaporate into a cloud of dust the moment I touched him. One palm touched the hard flesh, the other mirrored the movement, and I ran my hands down his chest and ribs to his stomach. He laughed as I exhaled softly, the sound of admiration accompanying the air that escaped my lips. "Will you show me now?" he asked, and I nodded. He slowly lifted my shirt, revealing me like a piece of art, like a statue on her debut. "Damn," he whispered. I felt the color flood my neck and rise higher. He was obsessed, completely obsessed. I was obsessed, completely obsessed. He was mine at that moment. I needed it. "Axel," I whispered. The only answer was a muffled rumbling. "Cecily, are you sure?" "Yes." There was a pause, a moment of reflection. "And you?" "Yes," he said firmly. I whispered about the things I imagined about him. I told him how surprised I was to see his body, that it was better than I imagined, that I could never get the image of him out of my head. My voice wavered as I continued. "I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. It's wrong, it was never right, but I can't handle it." I couldn't tell him that I loved him. I could not. He knew, we both knew, but the words had to stay inside. He found my lips, then kissed the tears on my cheeks. "It's okay," he whispered. "It's okay, Cecily. Do not cry. Everything is fine." He kissed me over and whispered soothing words, sweet words, words that might not have been true and wouldn't have mattered if they were true. It was enough to know that he didn't hate me. Everything else was insignificant, unimportant, worth no more than torn poems scattered in the wind. He was wonderful, so beautiful. When his eyes opened again, I blinked, pretending that I hadn't just looked at him like I was the first sunset I'd ever seen. I smiled awkwardly. I thought he would want me to leave to let him be alone, to end this weird and hot date, and let him move on with his life. Before I could finish the thought, he pulled me closer, begging me to lie next to him. I agreed, allowing him to hug me and hold me close. Mina never wants this again, he whispered almost to himself. My heart was torn between pain and anger. How could she not want to hold him or be in his arms? How could she not want to feel his breath on her skin, his hands on her back, the steady beating of his heart and the gentle rise and fall of his lungs as he caught his breath? How could she not want this moment? I let him hold me and I held him back. For 3 days, I stayed in a hotel room with Axel. I cried more times than I'd like to admit. I told him everything, told him every weird, sick, unhealthy thought I'd ever had about him. He listened to it all, accepted it all, forgave and understood it all. He loved Mina just as much as I loved him. He understood what it was like to have such an all-consuming, overwhelming, obsessive love. He didn't have it as much as I did, but he understood. I don't feel like I deserve your forgiveness, I told him on the second night of our stay together. He shook his head. You deserve it. I'm sorry that we never had a chance. My heart skipped a beat and sank more times than I could count. Don't tell me that. He nodded and kissed me instead of answering. Late at night on the third day, I left while he was in the shower. Given the possibility, I think we could probably stay in this hotel room forever. But Mina would undoubtedly rain fire on us if we did. I don't think either of us wanted this. After some slow and passionate lovemaking, I pretended to be asleep while Axel got up to take a shower. Then, despite my promise to him not to ruin Mina's life, I got dressed, packed my things, and burned her to the ground without even leaving the room. Cecily Larch? Is it you? I froze when I heard a familiar voice. Of course she was here. Of course, today, of all days, Natasha entered the same coffee shop as me, positioning herself between me and the exit, locking me in with no way to escape. Natasha, I said without much enthusiasm. Hello. Oh my God, she exclaimed and rushed towards me. I got ready, but she hugged me carefully. How much time has passed? What, 6 months? 8, I think. Wow, she breathed, looking down. So, I said nothing, looking at her as her words hung in the air, feeding off the discomfort of her waiting for my answer. So, she repeated, you look good. Thank you. Oh, sit down, have coffee with me, let's catch up. Catch up? I repeated. The last time I heard from you, you told me that I was a terrible person for what happened to Mina, and that I should consider checking myself into a mental hospital before I actually hurt someone. She laughed awkwardly. Was wrong. Please, Cecily, let me apologize. I shrugged and turned around, settling down at an empty table. I didn't have much time. Natasha hurried to order coffee and sat across from me before I could change my mind. As soon as she did this, the questions began. What have you been doing lately? I work, mostly. Not in the art store anymore. No, I work in a publishing house. Proofreader. Natasha chuckled, her eyes flashing. Congratulations. This is a step forward, eh? I shrugged. Are you, dating anyone? No. Another chuckle, this time more thoughtful. I knew the next question before she even thought about it. So, what really happened to? I suggest you ask Mina, I interrupted. Natasha sighed, trying to maintain her pleasant facade. I know what Mina said, and I know what Axel said too. They insist nothing happened, but if anyone knows why they got divorced, it has to be you. I looked at her, letting the words drown. Divorced? Natasha stared back. In another life, her look would have made me feel stupid. I didn't care in this life. Yeah, I think it was formalized. Last month, maybe a month earlier. This was news to me. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my face neutral. This is truly amazing, Natasha continued. Rumors said that Mina was pregnant and lost the child, and then filed for divorce a week later. But she categorically refuses to talk about it, and Axel, well, he doesn't communicate with anyone much at all. She simply said that they had grown apart and were happier alone. It's sad to hear this. Natasha leaned forward, lowering her voice. I think one of them cheated. I mean, do you know who came to live with Mina? I could have guessed, but I shook my head. Natasha pretended to sympathize. I'm really sorry. Blaine. She and Blaine are together now. HM. Well, they deserve each other. I hope they are happy. She smiled, hiding the fact that I knew she was disappointed with my reaction. So do you think she cheated, or was it? Natasha looked down again, almost instinctively. Maybe none of them cheated, or both. Or maybe they were just growing apart, I added reluctantly. I wouldn't know. You know, Mina broke off all contact with me. I heard she offered to help you. Well, you know better than me, probably. An awkward silence fell between us again. Natasha stirred restlessly. I enjoyed every second of it. You really didn't know? She finally asked. I really, truly didn't know. After I left the hotel room, I went to my basement, packed my things, threw away my cell phone and bought a new one, and moved to the other side of town. The plan was to leave the city, but given my financial situation at the time, it wasn't that easy. Instead, I lived in my small car for a while before getting a job at a small publishing house as a proofreader. The work was hard, the hours were long, and the pay was small, but it was enough to keep me in a small apartment and food on the table. I tried to avoid places where I might run into someone from my old life, but I had an appointment that day that couldn't be rescheduled. I didn't know, I said. And frankly, Natasha, I don't care. I'm done with all this. I now have more important concerns. Obviously, she nodded. Too personal if I ask anyone. Yes. Fine. She shrugged, refusing, and I knew exactly what would happen when our strange little date was over. Listen, I have to go, I said. I need to go back to work. Well, give me your number, she exclaimed. We can meet another time and... No. What? I shook my head. I won't give you my number. Are you sure? She asked in an icy tone. I might give it to Axel, since you might finally have a chance with him. I laughed so loudly that tears came to my eyes, so loudly that other people in the cafe looked at us out of the corner of their eyes, and Natasha looked slightly shocked. No, I finally said, calming down. Thank you, Natasha. I would say it was nice to see you, but, well, I shrugged and left the cafe. I'm not a gambler, but I could probably become a rich woman if I bet that she was already on the phone with Mina before the cafe door could slam behind me. Thinking about Axel on the way home. Well, more than usual. These days his presence was constant, but I kept him in the corner of my mind. I built a greenhouse there, one with brick walls and encased in glass, raised above the floor of my mind, and there were the weeds of my love for Axel. I am disappointed. Not because they got divorced. I was delighted, glad that he got out, that he did not return to her, that he was freed from the whirlpool that was Mina. I knew better than to get my hopes up, that this meant I, as Natasha put it, finally had a chance with him. Axel already had one broken, crazy woman in his life. He didn't need me. No, I was disappointed that he let her go so easily. I was actually angry. Mina almost destroyed him, manipulated him into someone new. She flooded him with her essence, extinguishing his fire, carving his ice into someone else she could control, someone who was no longer the beautiful, perfect person he was. Was he happy that she said they were growing apart? That they divorced because they were unhappy together? That she lived in the house they bought together with the man she slept with when she should have been faithful to him? I couldn't understand how he could let everything she did go away, how he could remain silent about what she did to him. Morals and ethics, I thought. Maybe this is what normal people do. Still, I was seething about it. When I left the hotel room, leaving only a USB drive containing a recording of my conversation with Mina and a note apologizing for not telling him about the recording before he spent 3 days making love to me, I assumed that Axel would thirst for revenge. I assumed he was using this to take everything from her. It was extremely unsatisfactory that he simply left her, dividing everything equally and moving out of his house, allowing her to continue living the way she was living. She was still sleeping with Blaine. Pigs, they deserved each other. I thought about this as I drove to work. I hadn't planned on informing Mina of my little revenge, intending to keep it to myself, but maybe when all was said and done, I'd send her a message. Again, this would mean that Axel would find out too, although I had a suspicion that he would soon find out thanks to stupid, nosy Natasha. It was about 2 in the morning when the thought occurred to me that maybe Mina was stupid enough to use the same password she used when we were roommates. She didn't use it, at least not for her email, but it made me wonder if she forgot to change the locks after Axel moved out. Probably not. Axel had moral principles. If he couldn't even use the recording I gave him, the likelihood that he would do anything devious with access to what was once his home was low. And I still had the key. I lay in bed dreaming of great, big ideas of what I could do with this little key. I could be petty and change the places of things in their house. I could be a criminal and rob them. I could go full crazy Cecily and burn the damn place down. Everything was possible. In the end, I decided to plant evidence of cheating to see if I could get Blaine and Mina to break up too. It wasn't very original, but it was simple enough and probably effective. I had time constraints, so I couldn't afford to make two big plans. I slept peacefully the rest of the night, waking up cheerful and cheerful in the morning. I was cheerful at work, so cheerful that some of my colleagues asked what was wrong with me. I read through stacks of pages and left on time at 5 o'clock, waving to my boss as he nodded approvingly. On the way home, I decided I wanted Chinese food and picked up a takeout order that could feed 3 people besides me. I headed to my apartment, intent on planning the rest of my revenge on Mina, rummaging through my bag and pulling out my keys as I exited the elevator and turned down the hallway. I stopped 3 doors from mine when I saw Axel standing there. He turned to me and froze, lips parted to say something, eyes not looking at me, but staring straight at me, focusing on the giant bag of food. Well, he was most likely focusing on the fact that a giant bag of food was resting on my very visible, very large, very pregnant belly. Wow, I said. Natasha wasted no time spreading this. How did you find me? It is mine, he asked. I sighed. Come in. Have dinner with me. Is this mine, Cecily? Let's at least discuss this in my apartment. His face was motionless, but his breathing was rapid, barely contained by his lungs. I was almost trembling when he finally met my gaze, eyes not full of ice, but full of blazing blue flames, scorching, dangerous, terrifying. Almost. Is it mine? I rolled my eyes and pushed the bag of food into his hands. Hold this until I unlock the door. He followed me, instinctively heading towards the kitchen and placing the bag on the table. I tossed my keys into the bowl by the door, kicked my shoes off onto the rug, and dropped my bag next to me. Axel watched silently as I finally turned to him. Yes, his expression didn't change. His gaze fell again to my stomach, then back to my face. You lied to me, you. I didn't lie. You said it was safe. You said that I could. No, I said it's normal. He fell silent again, realizing my words. So you planned. I hoped. I shrugged, moving towards the kitchen and taking plates out of the cabinet. I knew. It was the right time. I waited a couple of days before coming to you to make sure. I thought. I just hoped it might happen. I didn't know if you would even want to have sex with me. I had no idea that I would spend 3 days with you. So, did you want to trick me into getting pregnant? For me to leave Mina and be with you or something like that? I stopped, wounded, looking at him. Seriously, Axel? Yes, seriously. You're fucking pregnant. Cecily, You just said you got pregnant on purpose, and you didn't tell me a damn thing, and I didn't fucking tell you anything, and you're still asking me if I did this to make you leave Mina? His lips were parted, but nothing came out. I didn't want you to leave Mina because of me, I said. I wanted you to leave her because she treated you like you were worthless. I gave you the tape and left so you could stop it if you wanted. It has nothing to do with me. Oh, this damn recording. Venom dripped from his words as he found them again. Could you have told me about this before we had 3 days of fun? You wouldn't have sex with me. I what? I shrugged. I know it was mean. I don't regret it. I wanted to have sex with you once, just one damn time. I told you over and over again. I told you all the crazy shit I thought and did and wanted. So yes, I had the tape. And yes, I could have given it to you before anything happened. And yes, I guess that means I tricked you into having sex with me, and guess what, I still don't regret it. And you weren't going to tell me about the child. I thought you were still married. I started putting fried rice on each plate. The child was for me. I didn't want her to get back at Mina or trap you into being with me or anything like that. This is a terrible reason to have a child. I wanted her for me. He looked at me silently as I moved from fried rice to sweet and sour pork. I wasn't sure if he was trying to follow my twisted logic, trying to wrap his head around some insanity I had just tried to explain to him, or trying to tell me he wanted more pork and less rice. Her? Yes, it's a girl. He nodded sharply, his throat muscles tightening as he swallowed. I silently placed the rest of the food on our plates. Soy sauce? I asked, holding several bags in my hands. Yes, please, he said quietly. We carried the plates to the table, and I began to dig into them. Axel took a few small bites, looking at me as I practically inhaled the food. So you divorced her, I finally said with a mouthful of chicken. To her. Why didn't you tell anyone what she did? I just wanted to leave. She'll have to live with what she did. I raised an eyebrow at him. Did you just divide everything? Damn, Blaine is living with her now. Did you hear that? He snorted. Yeah. And that suits you? Of course not. He took another bite and looked at me. I froze midway, seeing something in his eyes that I had not seen before. Again, this fire, this blue flame, something cold, hot, and dangerously explosive. I pursed my lips, but it couldn't stop the smile from slowly spreading across my face. What? He said. You're planning something. He shrugged vaguely. I have something planned too, when I found out you weren't there. He raised his eyebrows, still not smiling, but that fiery sparkle in his eyes sparkled. When is the due date? He asked. In about 6 weeks. It seems like it's too much for you to make plans right now. I took the hint, nodded, and continued eating. Are you staying in the city? I was going to move, I replied. But it's expensive. Besides, I have a job here now. Do you want a roommate? Who are you thinking about? He laughed with a surprised bark, and I swear my little girl's legs fluttered at the sound of his laughter. Although maybe it was just my heart. When can you move? I asked. Next week. Next week. I smiled at my plate, then bit my lip. I'm not asking you to be a father, I said. Axel looked at him seriously again. I'm not asking you to love me either. I didn't lie. I wanted her. I wanted her for myself. I never thought that you would even want to know about her. But if you want. I want to. If you'll let me. His voice was firm, sincere, almost pleading. All I could do was nod, and a few moments later Axel stood there, lifting me to my feet and kissing me as I flew, walked through the clouds with his lips on mine. When we finished, he pulled me closer, kissed my face, my cheeks, and my neck, and put his hand on my stomach while we caught our breath. This is crazy, I whispered. Do you understand this? You're crazy. It must be. You're crazy too, he replied, and his lips touched my forehead. Then there are 2 of us. Don't tell anyone. They would advertise, you know. I fell silent as he finished the verse, his mind following mine, his words confirming what I had always suspected. He was perfect. We were perfect. I bit my lip, unable to name the emotion that coursed through me. He seemed to sense it and hugged me tighter. Quietly, we planned for the sudden concept of us together, us just weeks away from parenthood. We didn't talk about Mina anymore. I thought maybe our revenge was because we were together, that we were happy. After everything we found each other, Axel never mentioned what he was going to do, and I never talked about the half-baked plan I had, or how I still had the key to his old house. He moved in 3 days after he found me. He never told me how he found out my address. It didn't matter. We both had our secrets. He didn't tell anyone that he had found me, especially Mina, although we didn't hide the fact that we were together. I assumed that one day she would find out. We'll be somewhere in public, maybe with our daughter, and someone will see us. It didn't matter. None of them mattered. Still, it was difficult to know that she wasn't suffering. It burned, glowing embers somewhere deep in my soul, knowing what she had done to him. What she did to me was scarcely worth mentioning. She could hurt me all she wanted, and it would never compare to how I felt about what she hurt Axel. But out of respect for him, I let it go. We quickly settled into an established rhythm. It helped that we had lived together before. This was made easier by the fact that there were only two of us. For the first time in what seemed like forever, I was happy, truly happy, and every day as my belly grew and our daughter got closer to being born, I was happier. 2 weeks after he moved in, he returned home late one night, and the next day too. I ignored it, despite the gnawing suspicion in my stomach. That weekend he kissed me in the morning and said he had to work, then left the apartment before I could question why he had to work on Saturday. When he returned around dinner time, I asked. He must have seen the fear in my eyes because he immediately hugged me, kissed my forehead, and promised me that it wasn't what I thought. You say this, but you will see, he whispered. You'll see soon. I promise. I thought that maybe he was going to propose, which made me even more worried and worried. Well, not only did I get pregnant without telling him, and now he was living with me after months of separation, and this all happened after a crazy, toxic, crazy woman that almost destroyed us both. But it seemed a little early for marriage. However, he didn't lie. I didn't wait long to find out. We sat at the table that night, tension still tugging at us as we quietly ate dinner, when suddenly his phone rang. He wiped his mouth with a napkin and answered, his tone calm and stoic. What? Okay, hello to you too. What do you want? There was a long, tense pause while he listened. Wow, I'm sorry to hear it. Another long pause. Did they say what caused it? And you think, are you serious? You're crazy. You're calling me to make baseless accusations. Besides, what's in it for me? I'm not covered by insurance anymore, remember? You bought my share? He met my gaze. No, I canceled it. It's in the contract, remember. How come you didn't take out new insurance? Well, I'm sorry to hear that. Good luck, Mina. He put down the phone and continued eating. I looked at him, amazed, confused, and a little worried. What a day, he said calmly. It's good that I was with you all day today, isn't it? I raised an eyebrow. Certainly. We went to buy Baby to pick out a car seat, and when we got home, you worked on the nursery. Yes, I remember that too, he said, continuing to eat. Poor Mina. It looks like her house burned down. I dropped my fork and stared at him, my mouth hanging open. They said it looked like she left the hair straightener on before leaving for work. She did this 1,000 times when we lived together, I said, picking up my fork. I always turned it off for her. I must even have old letters that I sent her, warning her to be more careful next time. When our eyes met again, and I saw that flickering blue flame in his eyes, I couldn't help the slow smile on my face. Of course, we were perfect together. He was just as damn crazy as I was. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think click to the next one.